It is time for the Rural Intelligence Report. That means it is time to bring in none other than Mark Williams as he joins us every week. We take a look at some of the things going on in and around the tri-state region, what's coming up, what's been going on, and also great reports on lots of interesting people, places, and things. Mark, nice to speak to you again today.
Good morning, Marshall. And it looks like a lovely week of bad weather, but nevertheless, there are lots of good reasons to get out to visit places and to listen to stories and lectures and books and book readings and other adventures as well. So we've got a lot to talk about this week.
Well, we'll start off in Great Barrington on March the 5th.
Well, this particular event caught my eye because I really love Chesterwood, which was the Stockbridge home of, and it was not just a home, it was a studio and beautiful gardens of Daniel Chester French, who I guess is one of America's foremost public sculptors. And it's one of those museums which probably they'll get upset with me saying it's a small but really beautiful little museum. We hear about all the great big museums in our area, but this one is just absolutely delightful to visit, and you get a real flavor of Daniel Chester French. And on Tuesday, March the 5th, at Bard College at Simon's Rock in Great Barrington, there's a book reading and a talk and a slide presentation called Monument Man, The Life and Art of Daniel Chester French. So it's very relevant that it's there in Great Barrington, just down the street, as it were, from Chesterwood, his home and studio. The Monument Man, The Life and Art of Daniel Chester French is a new book by a really well-known Lincoln scholar called Harold Holzer, and he's turned his gaze on Daniel Chester French. He's going to be at Simon's Rock, and he'll be having a full slide lecture presentation. It's followed by a reception, and I'm sure he'll sign a book for those people who attend as well. So if you get a chance, do go, and of course it'll give you a bit of a taste of the summer, because that's when Chesterwood is actually open to the public. It was great fun. So that's at Simon's Rock in Great Barrington at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March the 5th.
On March the 5th, we can head to Salisbury, Connecticut for another author.
Yeah, this is interesting. Whitney Sherritt wrote a novel a few weeks ago. It's just been published, called The Age of Light. And she has told the story of a Vogue model in the 1920s, I think, who turned renowned photographer Lee Miller, and then had to forge a new identity for herself as an artist as opposed to a muse. Anyway, it sounds like a lovely, light book to really enjoy as you're curled up on the sofa in front of the fire. You do need to sign up for this event in advance. So do go to ruralintelligence.com and connect through. And the event is in Salisbury at the White Hart Inn at 6 o'clock that Tuesday, March the 5th as well. And it's part of their White Hart Inn book reading series. Really, so that is lovely as well. And that's, as I say, Tuesday, March the 5th, 6 o'clock.
On March the 6th in Rhinebeck, New York, we have yet another author.
Yeah, Oblong Books and Music has really got a stream of really good authors coming through. And I noticed that David Means is going to be at their Rhinebeck store on Wednesday, March the 6th at 6 o'clock. He published a novel called Hystopia, and it was nominated for the Man Booker Prize a couple of years ago, and it was a real success, really widely acclaimed. But he has changed back to his normal form, which is the short story. And this has just published a book of short stories called Instructions for a Funeral. And he's going to be at Oblong Books and Music at 6 o'clock in Rhinebeck, as it were, on March the 6th to talk about his book, give some readings, and of course you'll be able to pick up a signed copy. So that one's another really good opportunity to check out another good author.
On March the 7th, we'll head to Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Well, actually, before we go to Williamstown, I think what we should do is talk about what's happening at the Gun Memorial Library in Washington on Thursday, March the 7th, because, of course, March is Women's History Month. And I spotted a really fascinating looking lecture at the Gun Memorial Library on Thursday, March the 7th, by Dr. Lucianne Lavin. And it's a Native American women's lecture. And I've only just really discovered that there's this Institute for American Indian Studies in Washington, and I'm absolutely loving the sort of programming they're putting on. So Dr. Lucianne Lavin is going to be, who's a director of research for the Institute for American Indian Studies, is going to be presenting a full visual lecture of the traditional role of Native American women in Southern New England tribal societies. It really sounds absolutely fascinating, and it's good that the Gun Memorial Library is putting on these type of events. So that's Thursday, March the 7th, 6:30 in the evening, as I say, at the Gun Memorial Library.
March 7th in Tivoli, New York.
Yes. Oh, that's this looks good fun. Now, we all know Murray's in Tivoli, and then they have upstairs in Murray's a real opportunity to hear some talks and another author this time round. So they're bringing in the author Kees Lehman, and Lehman has a really interesting memoir. It's called Heavy. It was published a few years ago, and it was shortlisted for the Carnegie Medal and the Kirkus Prize as well. And it's really a meditation on the trauma and issues of growing up as a black man in America. It was this book was named Best Book of 2018 by the New York Times, by the Publishers Weekly, by NPR, and the Washington Post, including, and there are a whole lot of other people who've lauded it as well. It's it is a really important book, and it is a chance to also do another thing, because a percentage of the ticket and book sales will be donated to support the Tivoli Free Library, which is, we know, burnt down some months ago, and is going to be restored, and they need to raise money to do that. So that's on Thursday, March the 7th, upstairs at Murray's in Tivoli, and it starts at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Well, we will go from there to Millerton, New York, and another one of the dine-out sessions.
Yeah, look, we have to raise money for a whole lot of good places and events and organizations, and the Northeast Historical Society is a really good organization. And 52 Main in Millerton is really being a great supporter. So on Thursday, if you go out for dinner on Thursday at 52 Main in Millerton, 10% of their total dinner proceeds will go to the Northeast Historical Society to support their research. And as I've said before, to help digitize its collection, which is really significant, given that obviously if you digitize, then it can be used by scholars and by pupils all around the country as well. By the way, it makes logical sense to make a dinner reservation just to make it easier for them to organize themselves. So that's Thursday the 7th, dinner out at Millerton at 52 Main.
And from 52 Main in Millerton, let's go to Egremont, Massachusetts.
Yeah, in South Egremont, the barn at the Egremont Village Inn is doing great things. And on Thursday evening, there's a great fun event. It's called Songs for Petra, and it's featuring Petra Hayden. And so it's all about the music of John Zorn and the lyrics of the songwriter Jesse Harris, who's actually a Grammy award-winning writer. It's all performed by Petra Hayden, who not only sings but also plays the violin. And there's a guitarist, a bass player. They have drums, and also there's backing group. There's guitar and vocals as well. And it's sure to be a really fun event at the barn at Egremont Village Inn on Thursday, March the 7th. It starts at 8 o'clock in the evening.
And right now, we've got a couple of different items at Stair Galleries.
Yeah, I spotted this and I thought it was intriguing because, of course, Rural Intelligence is an online only magazine. We don't publish anything printed. And on Friday, the March the 8th, in Hudson, they are having an online only sale. And it starts at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not sure everyone, so you can log on and you can actually bid online. And the sale is actually called Modern, Modern, Modern. And it's a online sale of watercolors, drawings, prints, paintings, and photographs from both American and European and Israeli artists as well. And there's a whole series of different styles and whatever it is. But I thought it was really interesting that Stair Galleries on that Friday, March the 8th, is going to go for this format of online sales. And you can go online and see all the different artists, including Jean Cocteau and paper artists like Christo and people like that. Anyway, you can go onto that. But later in the evening, they're having one of their traditional Friday evening sales actually at Stair Galleries, and that will be a much more traditional sale, and it will feature a selection of Asian porcelain, lacquer, pottery, and prints. So that's all, as it were, in Hudson and in the cloud on Friday, March the 8th at Stair Galleries. And of course, you can go to Stair Galleries' website, or you can go there via Rural Intelligence as well.
All right. Well, let's get a little different here. We'll go to Pittsfield Education Foundation wine tasting.
Yeah, the Pittsfield Education Foundation is dedicated to increasing the funding and learning opportunities for Pittsfield public school teachers as well as the students. So it's a clever way. If you can encourage the teachers, it really helps the students as well, and of course vice versa. So anyway, they are hosting their second annual wine and beer tasting at the Berkshire Hills Country Club on Friday evening. It starts at 6 o'clock. So you get a chance to sample all sorts of wines and local brews as well. And on top of that, you can enter for chances to win all sorts of raffle items as well. So it's a really good cause Friday evening at the Berkshire Hills Country Club.
We'll move on from Pittsfield to Hudson on the 8th at 7 p.m.
Well, I mentioned that March is Women's Month, and actually Friday, March the 8th, I think, is International Women's Day itself. And Spotty Dogs and Ale in Hudson is actually has brought in the author Andrea Barnett, and she's going to read from her book, which is appropriately titled Visionary Women. It's the story of 4 visionaries who really have profoundly shaped the world we live in today. So it's totally appropriate for Women's Day, International Women's Day. A portion of the sales also of this book will be donated to the Columbia Land Conservancy as well, another great organization. So check out Spotty Dog Books and Ale. Go along, grab a pint of bitter, sit back and listen to Andrea Barnett talk about and read from her new book.
All right. How about going to Sheffield, Massachusetts?
Yeah, one of the organizations which we have just been absolutely loving. It's new, it's young, full of really interesting things and great ideas, is the Boondocks Film Society. So every few weeks they set up a new location and they play a really great fun film. And on Friday, March the 8th, they are going to be at Big Elm Brewing in Sheffield because Big Elm Brewing is releasing its new Leon Milk Stout. Sounds pretty impressive. I'm not normally a milk stout drinker, but I suspect I will definitely be sampling this. And the Boondocks Film Society is popping up there with a screening of the film The Professional. It was, or Leon the Professional, I guess, which is appropriately named. It's a 1994 film. It starred Natalie Portman, Gary Oldman, John Reno as well, and and it's not just a film showing and not just a beer tasting, but there will be all sorts of other fun events going on around it. There's going to be a pop-up food vendor. They give you a commemorative poster, all sorts of other things like that. It's really great fun. There'll be music as well as one of the big events. So that's Friday evening in Sheffield at Big Elm Brewing at 7 o'clock in the evening. And again, you probably have to go onto the website and check in before you arrive, but it will be a really fun evening one way and another.
We'll go from Sheffield, Massachusetts, back to Hudson, New York.
Well, I spotted this. Hudson Hall has a great selection of different things going on at Hudson Hall. And on Friday the 8th, there's a really interesting group of 3 musicians who are sort of grown up in the traditional music, classic music background, but they have twisted it. So the cellist Julia Kent, who plays with the Rasputina, and Anthony and the Johnsons, will be joining. She's a cellist. She's going to be joined by the violinist Christopher Tignor and a guitarist called Alexander Turnquist. And they are, have taken their classic music roots and they have become much more experimental. And they use like tape manipulations, they use live loopings and custom-built instruments to really extend what you call traditional music, and they make it really funky and really great fun. And they're putting on a program at Hudson Hall on Friday, March the 8th, starts at 7 o'clock in the evening, and it's called Into the Here and Now. Check it out if you're looking for something which is really unusual and fun. That's it, definitely worthwhile attending on Hudson Hall, Friday, March the 8th.
On March the 9th, let's head south to Poughkeepsie, New York.
Yeah, we talk about this every year. Actually, I think they've only been doing it for a few years, and it also I talk about it partly because I just absolutely love baby goats. And Sprout Creek Farm, just outside Poughkeepsie, is hosting a weekend that's both March the 9th and 10th, which is the Big Gay Hudson Valley's Baby Goat Weekend. And that is actually, it takes place at Sprout Creek Farm because it's their peak kidding weekend. The number of baby goats that weekend is that are being born is absolutely enormous, and they really encourage you to help milk and care for the goats and the goat mums, and you get to see these really amazing newborn kids, which are just absolutely darling, really amazing. So so you get to see the farm as well and see how they operate. They're even arranging things like goat yoga, which is really funny. If you've seen YouTube videos of goat yoga, it definitely is great fun. Anyway, there are all sorts of farm-to-table meals being prepared, and all sorts of other things. So there's a lot going on. So you'll have to check out their website for all the events over the weekend, but definitely check it out on March the 9th and 10th down there at Sprout Creek Farm in Poughkeepsie.
Our next stop is Stockbridge, Massachusetts.
Well, this is something I've always wanted to do, and I'm really this is why I put this in, because it tickled my fancy. The Berkshire Botanical Gardens on March the 9th are having a class which is called Cheese Making at Home. So it's a full class where they tell you what sort of equipment and supplies you need, and then they talk about the basic techniques that you need to sort of make nearly all types of cheese. I'm not sure that every type of cheese, but anyway, a lot of cheeses. And then they actually specifically instruct you on how to make 3 types of cheese, to taste them, and of course you get to take them home and eat them as well. That's the great thing, that this is a really practical class at the Berkshire Botanical Gardens. So I'm sure you'll have to sign up for it because it will be a limited room in that. But do check it out. That's Saturday, March the 9th, starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Berkshire Botanical Garden. there are two fun events, actually, which are completely separate, but which I couldn't resist putting together on Saturday, March the 9th, because they looked because it was so tempting, and I'll tell you why. The first one is at the Scoville Library in Salisbury at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They've got a lecture from Mark Mikolas, and it's a really actually fascinating lecture, which I'm really fascinated. I would love to go to if I'm not doing the cheese making class. The Salisbury Association Land Trust has brought in Mark, who is the author of a book called A Beginner's Guide to Recognizing Trees of the Northeast. And he is going to talk about how to recognize trees at a glance, the way that foresters do. And I must admit that I find, we own land and farm, and I'm always worried about what trees are where and how they are and whatever it is. And I've been terrible at identifying trees. So this sounds like a really great, easy method of how to identify trees. And then I just couldn't resist it, because literally at 2 o'clock and then at 7:30 in the evening, back in Sheffield, Massachusetts, at Dewey Hall, the Aglet Theatre Company is holding an event which is called A Walk in the Woods, which is completely appropriately named if you are looking for trees. But in fact, actually, it's a completely separate event. It's got nothing really to do with with identifying trees, but I just couldn't resist putting them together. Now, let me remind you. So the Aglet Theatre Company arranges these staged readings, and they do it throughout the winter. And this week, the staged reading is of a play by Lee Blessing. And the story surrounds two superpower arms negotiators, a Russian and American. They meet informally after the long, frustrating hours at the bargaining table. And of course, it turns out that they both have very different personalities. The Russian is a seasoned veteran. He's urbane and humorous, but profoundly cynical as well. Whereas the young American counterpart is a newcomer, is a bit stuffy and pedantic, and a bit too idealistic about what can be achieved in these superpower negotiations of one sort or another. And the lovely thing about the Aglet Theatre Company is that you're encouraged to go, and then afterwards there's a chance to discuss the play with the author and with the actors as well, so it's more than just going and listening to a stage reading. Anyway, that's at Dewey Hall in Sheffield on Saturday, March the 9th. And they have two sessions. They have a 2 o'clock session and then a 7:30 session in the evening as well.
Hudson, New York, we can go there on the 9th.
Yeah, back to Spotty Dog Books and Ale. And they have their volume reading series every month. They and this one is the March one. They welcome 3 authors, hopefully local, not always local, but a lot of them are. And they have readings from those 3 authors. You go along, enjoy a beer or a drink or whatever it is, and then there's music. They roll back their shelves and there's music from a guest DJ. And on this month, the series authors are Luke Sant, who wrote Low Life. Then there's the 2-time Pushcart Prize nominee, Valerie Singh, and then also Julianne Medoff as well is going to be reading. And then there's a guest DJ who will be doing a music set. That's on Saturday, March the 9th in Hudson, 7 o'clock in the evening.
And from Hudson, New York, let's go to Spencertown.
Well, March means we're heading into St. Patrick's Day, and Spencertown Academy Art Center in Spencertown has got a completely appropriate concert on. It's a Celtic music concert with Kevin McCrell and Brian Melnick. Kevin is a Celtic folk songwriter. And he's going to be joined by Brian, who's a percussionist, and they are going to be singing a whole series of Irish and Celtic themed songs, one way and another, and they'll be sort of really tapping your toes. And that's at the Spencertown Academy Art Center on Saturday, March the 9th at 8 o'clock in the evening.
And that will wrap up a very busy week. Mark, we'll speak to you next week.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Look forward to it, Marshall.